The Black Sash organization is calling for the social relief of distress grant to be extended to unemployed people aged between 18 and 59 years with little to no income. This comes as South Africa records 21,584 new COVID-19 cases. Let's talk now to Ms. Evashnee Naidu, who is coming to us from Black Sash in KwaZulu-Natal. She is the regional manager there. A very good afternoon to you, Ms. Naidu. Talk to us about the social relief measures that you are calling to be reinstated. Which ones specifically?
So, as we know that we're currently in the third wave of the pandemic, and it's currently also being exacerbated by the fact that we're also having level 4 lockdown restrictions. And despite that, the COVID-19 grant was terminated at the end of April this year. But despite the fact that the pandemic is still continuing and with the added restrictions, it means that those people that have not been able to find work during this time or have no other source of income are now not able to provide for themselves or their families due to the termination of the COVID-19 grant, which was sitting at 350 Rand. But also in line with that, while we're asking for the reinstatement of that grant, we're also asking that that amount should be increased to at least 585 Rand per month, which is the food poverty line in South Africa, so that individuals can actually make ends meet, considering both the health and the humanitarian crisis that South Africa is undergoing. The other issue is that caregivers, those who are receiving child support grants on behalf of their children, have also been excluded from accessing the COVID-19 grant by virtue of the fact that they are receiving the child support grant. But the child support grant is actually for the benefit of the child and not the caregiver. So this large population of vulnerable women, we're actually pushing them deeper and deeper into the abyss of poverty and are ensuring that their households are not able to cope with the fact that we are in the third wave of the pandemic and these added restrictions.
If you could, Ms. Naidu, talk to us about some of the stories that you've heard of people's real life experiences who come to you about how COVID-19 has actually impacted their livelihoods.
So in terms of what we've seen over the past year and a half, many people who are already on the fringes of society are even in deeper suffering than they were before. By virtue of the fact that this pandemic is still continuing, we have extremely high levels of unemployment in this country. And we also have a system of structural unemployment where there's just not enough jobs for all of the people that we have in South Africa. So if you're in formal employment and you lose your job, God forbid, there are measures where you would have contributed to some form of protection should you lose your job. However, those that are in the informal sector, or particularly those that were receiving some form of grant, would have not been able to do their piece jobs or add to their income. So those people are actually suffering. And we also know that within households, for instance, an older person's grant, which is meant for the elderly person, actually supports households. And that has been seen far more often within the past year and a half, where people who have lost their jobs, who have had to move away because they couldn't pay rent in the urban areas, etc., have had to now go and live together in communal settings in order to support each other. And the COVID grant was one measure of being able to meet that. And, people have shared with us, while they were getting the COVID-19 grant, they were able to have dignity, they were able to contribute to groceries in their household so that food security levels were able to not be as weak as we're seeing it nowadays, and that people were also able to try and use the little means of 350 Rand to look at ways to even empower themselves, for instance, by trying to get their driver's license, for starting little community businesses where they sold fruit and chips, etc., so that they could actually create some kind of livelihood for themselves and their households. With the termination of the grant in April, it means that all of these initiatives have had to stop because there really is no cash transfer for these individuals or households at the moment.
As Black Sash, you have been advocating for the basic income, for the basic income support. How far are you regarding this?
So it's not only the Black Sash alone. We've been working with other organizations as well as coalitions like Pay the Grants, etc. And we've been very vocal, particularly over the last year and a half, about how dire the need is for basic income support to be introduced into South Africa. And we thought that with the government's initiative of introducing the COVID grant, that there was political will behind this, and we were hoping that with the situation worsening over these past months, particularly now where we're sitting, we thought that government would look at this as a stepping stone to actually increasing a permanent basic income support. We've written various open letters, we've had various demonstrations over the last couple of months, etc., in order to try to raise the profile of this campaign, but also to highlight the plight of those that are on the receiving end of this grant, in order to allow government to see just what the impact of this grant has had. Unfortunately, to date, we have been able to meet directly to share with them our recommendations about how South Africa could possibly afford this grant. But we are also pleased to note that various political parties are also in support of the COVID-19 grant or a basic income support, and that also the Minister of Social Development herself has been very vocal about her calls for a basic income support in South Africa. And we hope that in line with all of these calls and all of these voices being amplified in terms of the call for a basic income support, the government and Treasury will take heed of this and will actually start looking towards the implementation of some form of basic income support, particularly for those aged 18 to 59, not just in the short term, but also looking towards making it a universal income support.
And I'd like us to focus on exactly that, on how you propose it would work. Yes, you have mentioned the ages between 18 and 59 who would be eligible, and could this actually live for an entire lifetime of an individual who perhaps doesn't get a job throughout their entire life?
That's what we're hoping. As we've seen with the high levels of unemployment in South Africa, many of our people, particularly the very vulnerable between 50 to 59 at the moment, never get work. And some of our people, as you know, have never worked in their lives. But between ages to 18 to 59, there is no form of social assistance that is available for them. And if government arranges some kind of cash transfer scheme like we've seen with the COVID-19 grant, we can at least see some kind of dignified living for these individuals. And also what we've noted, especially in the past year and a half with the COVID-19 grant, is that we've noticed that there has been increased economic activity in those communities where people have been receiving the grants. People have had lesser health issues in terms of where nutrition was a factor, because they've been able to provide better food for their homes and their households. Also, it empowers people to start looking for jobs, because they then have the income in order to prepare themselves, get their CVs done, have transport to travel to places for interviews, as well as look at enhancing their skills in order for them to access jobs. So for us as the Black Sash, we see the basic income grant as an investment in people rather than a burden or a drain on the economy, because by allowing people to have cash transfers, they then will participate and grow the economy in a far wider way than we are actually seeing currently, because of the way this pandemic has impacted on the economy of South Africa.
Has there yet been an estimation as to how much this perhaps would cost government on an annual basis?
I think we're definitely talking in the billions. It's not a small amount of money that we're talking about. But we, as the Black Sash, we're looking at various ways that this can be funded. And if we look just at our complex tax system, and if we look at the various ways in which our tax can be prioritized in terms of looking at possibly a social protection tax, where we look at those monies just funding solely social initiatives within South Africa, for instance, a basic income support, corporate tax, a wealth tax. We know there's very unequal levels of wealth within South Africa. And if we looked at possibly the wealth tax as being another option of funding that, but also things like irregular expenditure. Year in and year out, we hear the reports from the Auditor General about how departments spend money or using money in ways that really is not adding value to the services of our people. And if that money could be retrieved and used for social initiatives, we actually would see the investment back in our communities and back in our country, where people would be the beneficiaries of this and being able to do something with it. Also looking things like corporate tax, etc. So there's a variety of options that are available. And if government shows the political will about looking at what this can actually cost, but where we can actually find the money in terms of the way we reprioritize our budgets and the way we see where the money goes to, we actually feel that it is feasible and that it actually can be funded to ensure that there is some form of support. And of course, we know that as South Africa, we're in a very poor situation financially. So we also realized that, maybe it could not be a universal grant immediately. There could be a progressive realization of the right to basic income support, looking at particularly vulnerable groups, even within age 18 to 59. But what we would like to see is government taking some kind of initiative or step towards making that a reality. And that is what we are not seeing right now.
And what would the value, at least the proposed value, of the basic income support grant be initially?
For us as the Black Sash, we're looking at the lowest of the low as an option, and that would be the food poverty line of 585 Rand. And we know that is where the bulk of the money for all of these people that have been receiving the COVID grant have been going to. It's been primarily in order to buy food, then followed by things like rent, electricity, etc. And if we look at the food poverty line as a basis, or being really adventurous, we could look at the upper bound poverty level, which sits at around 1,200 Rand a month. Those are the options that we would like to look between, so that people can feel that the cash transfer that they're receiving actually does give them some dignity, and is actually something that they can use and actually contribute to their households and their livelihood.
Before I let you go, Ms. Naidu, I did ask you this earlier on, but I would like more clarity as to where these discussions are. Is it just a proposal at this stage, or has this process gone a bit further as far as engagement with government and some sort of consideration from government regarding this?
So in terms of media reports that we have had access to, like the Ground Up article, we know that this has been a discussion at a NEDLAC level, and that there has been discussions at that level about a possible way to fund it and how it should look. And there have also been murmurs that the Department of Social Development themselves are looking at a discussion paper on how to take this forward. And we're hoping that it is a paper that is actually tangible, with timelines and with a realistic plan of action as to how we can roll this out as South Africa.
Well, we thank you so much for your time.